Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thanks for tuning in to the 2Fit podcast, hosted by the 2Fit guys, Jake and Josh. Now, 2Fit, by definition, is actively pursuing a state of health and well-being beyond perceived limitations. So, if you're looking to push the boundaries of performance mentally, physically, and everywhere in between, then you have come to the right place. On the 2Fit podcast, we will be interviewing and having fireside chats with renowned experts from doctors and strength and conditioning coaches to athletes and entrepreneurs. Our goal is to extract tools and tricks of the trade that you can implement whether you're a world-class athlete, weekend warrior, entrepreneur, or grinding out the 8 to 5, all in order to assist you on your journey to becoming 2Fit. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 2Fit podcast. Now, today you're in for a real treat. A 2Fit treat, if you will. So, you know how in our intro we say we're going to be bringing to you doctors, strength and conditioning coaches, athletes, and sometimes just some bad A people? Well, that's what we got in store for you today. A couple of just awesome guys with some really great stories. Their names are Dustin and Aaron. Now, both of them spent the majority of their working careers as Marines. They both went on to join Marine Recon following that. And then they both worked private security kind of in their own way, post-military. And we'll get into all that. We'll get into their war stories, some of their physical training, some of the real gut checks that they both had to go through, some bar brawls, and much, much more. We even touch on some business and how each of them kind of extrapolate their military experience and apply it to their business endeavors today. Then they both give us their 2 cents on how you, as a civilian, can better protect yourself in everyday life. Now, most of the time, I'd be telling you to grab a hot cup of coffee and a notepad, sit back and get ready to learn some stuff. Well, today you're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot about life. But honestly, this podcast pairs best with an ice cold brew and a couple of buddies. So enjoy. All right, today we're sitting down with Dustin and Aaron of West End Elixir. It's a new bar down here on Northgate. If you haven't come down and checked it out yet, you need to get down here. Just a really cool, classic, kind of vintage feel to it. I say one of the better outdoor patio atmospheres that you can find. Also, Dustin whips up his own alcoholic concoctions that'll knock your socks off. There's some great stuff. And also, Aaron's back there whipping up some artisan pizza. We brought Dustin and Aaron on today not only because of their pizza and alcohol experience, but because they spent the majority of their career in the Marines and Marine Recon. And we're just excited to get this thing kicked off and just hear what these guys have to offer. So, Dustin and Aaron, thanks for having us here today.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So, guys, let's dive into a little bit of your background. Tell us. So we both know you're kind of running the show here at West End. Dustin, you and I have known each other for a couple years now, I guess. And Aaron, we've met 4 or 5 times. I know that we like to share the war stories fairly often, not from my experience, but from y'all's. So we'll kind of give us a little bit of your background before you arrived here.
I was in the Marines joined in 04. Went to Iraq twice and Afghanistan once. Got out and came here for school. Originally from New Orleans, so this was kind of my first time in Texas. I'll say first time. I've been living here for 4 years, but didn't have any experience in Texas beforehand.
Anything that drew you to Texas in particular?
Just Texas A&M, really. And Aaron over here is from Buffalo, New York.
I'm sorry.
Well,
at least you got out of there.
yeah. And I came here. So I grew up here, well, in the Dallas area for the most part. And I actually spent 4 years in the Army as a paratrooper. Then I got out for a couple years. I got bored, decided I hadn't been abused enough. So then I joined the Marine Corps and went the recon route. And then I was floating around, and I've known Dustin for a few years. We met in Houston 5 years ago, I think. And needed a new direction. And so he said, hey, come to College Station. I'm going to open up my own bar and come to work. So here I am.
And does the abusement still happen?
Oh, the abusement is just nonstop.
You're still in the military with this guy, right?
Yes,
That's pretty
yeah.
much the situation.
No, I don't go military on him. I just make fun of him from being from New York.
Well, I had to,
And then he does all those deep dish pizzas.
well, I just want to know why you had me sign a non-disclosure agreement that I can't sue you for sexual harassment. That's just what I want to know.
So did y'all go into the military out of high school?
I did, yes.
I did.
Right. So what happened after your 4 years in the Army? What'd you do in that break in there?
I bounced.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean like literally like bounced like a bounce. I was worked a bunch of different bars and clubs, working the door, working the floor. And that's what I did. I spent about a year in Albuquerque, New Mexico, training at this was back in 1999. Training at a place that's called Greg Jackson's, which is a big MMA gym out in Albuquerque. And so that was a great experience for me. And that's kind of what paved the way for me to go into the Marine Corps.
So this kind of for both of you, like you want to take it separately. Aaron, since you're on that topic, what made you both want to go into the military? Was that your upbringing? Did you have parents in the military? What kind of drew you to that from out of high school?
I joined my whole entire life. All I wanted to do was be a Navy SEAL, and that was all because of this video game called Metal Gear Solid. All right, I'm just you're about to get nerded. I'm about to get nerded out.
I'm gonna outrage you.
So when I went to the recruiter to try and see if I could be a Navy SEAL, they said my eyesight was too bad, so I didn't want to do anything else in the Navy. So I ended up joining the Marines instead, in infantry.
Well, I was born a poor black child on a southern plantation. That's from Steve Martin. But for me, I grew up a Buffalo Yankee in the Dallas area, kind of surrounded by Texans. And single mom raised myself and my little sister. And so I didn't really have a father figure growing up. So he would play Metal Gear, and we didn't have any of those bleepity bleeps, video games.
Back in the 70s.
Yeah. But our video games were called books. And, I got really into reading, and one of my favorite subjects was science fiction and fantasy. And so since I didn't have a father figure around to tell me that what I was reading was fairy tales and that, real people like that didn't exist, real heroes, real warriors, that's not real. You're going to go and get a 9 to 5 and just do that life. Well, I didn't have anybody to tell me that. So as I was growing up, I just wanted to be a part of something bigger and greater than myself. And I wanted that sense of belonging because I didn't have that being a young Yankee in a couple of Texas cow towns. So that was what led me. And I actually wanted to join the Marine Corps. I used to go to the Marine recruiting office when I was a young teenager, and they'd let me come in and watch all their videos and sit down. And I still remember I went into one of the Marine recruiting offices I used to go to, and I was about 17, and they must have gotten a new gunny in the office. So I walked in, I said, "Hey, how you doing? I'm going to enlist in like a year, but I just figured I'd come in and hang out." I guess it was a bad day for that gunny because he was like, "Well, if you're not old enough to enlist, you're wasting my time." And so I went next door to the Army recruiter, and they said, "No, come on in, watch all our videos." And so I ended up doing a tour in the Army. But after I got out of the Army, I love the Army. I had a lot of great experiences there, but there's just nothing like being a Marine. As motarded as that sounds, I mean, that's just the truth of it. I found what I was looking for in the Corps.
So, Aaron, it sounds like you went into it not wanting to go Special Forces, right away. At least you didn't know that's what you wanted to do. And Dustin, it sounds like you knew you wanted to do that, trying to join the SEALs right away. So, what kind of makes you want to take it to that next level, not just be an infantryman, not just a rifleman,
I love the infantry. I think the Marine Corps infantry is probably still in the same par as like other special operations from other branches of the military, in my opinion, just from training and just pure aggressiveness and, I mean, combat experience. Marine Corps Infantry, I probably has more combat experience than I'd say other special operations units, just because, you know, they're constantly deploying, whereas special operations units have to train up, and then they go in there and they do very specific missions and everything else. Whereas for the infantry, you're just totally immersed into your environment. You're in it every day. Even when you're on your patrol base, you're still, you know, subject to attacks and everything else. So,
what drew you from being in the Marines and the infantry to trying out for recon?
I was after I got off active duty, I went to this one unit called 123 in Houston, and then they were cool guys, but somebody was like, who wants to go to 4th Recon in San Antonio, and I was just like, I'll do it. And that was that.
For me, my story, it isn't really all that glamorous. I've got a lot of achievements in my life. I've been hamstrung by myself a couple of times. I'm my own worst enemy. I actually enlisted in the Army on a Ranger contract. So what I did was I went to basic at Fort Benning, Georgia, AIT. I went to airborne school, and then they had what's called RIP, which is the Ranger Indoctrination Program. And that's about 3 weeks of sheer hell. If you pass that, which I did, you get sent to one of the 3 Ranger battalions in the Ranger Regiment. So I actually went to 2nd Ranger Battalion up at Fort Lewis and spent probably about 8 months with them. Back then, the culture of the Ranger Regiment is, from the way I understand it, completely different now than it was then. I went to jungle school, did some really cool, really great training. Some of the training I did in the Rangers, I carried with me, you know, through my time in Marine reconnaissance. But I was young and not as mature as I needed to be, and so I actually quit the 2nd Ranger Battalion. And then I went on to go to the 1st of 501st Airborne up at Fort Richardson, Alaska. So after I got out of the Army, that was another thing that made me want to go into the Marine Corps. Was I felt like I'd let myself down. And so I'd already done the Army, didn't want to do that again. So I figured I'd join the Marines. And you know, I'm probably going to catch some flack for this, but, you know, Dustin's absolutely right. I would put a company of Marines up against a company of Rangers any day of the week, especially when it comes to light infantry tactics and skills.
So that jungle school, I've heard some things about Ranger, the Ranger kind of induct program and training and all that. Is that where they actually kind of drop you off, basically like the swamps of Louisiana, Georgia, that area, and you basically got to survive for 2 weeks?
No, that's I don't know what that would be, but this was at Fort Sherman, Panama, and it was end of 1994. So it's a three and a half week school. You know, it's not like a big ass kicker. It's not a smoke check or anything. Oddly enough, we actually didn't get to finish it because in 1994 there were a bunch of Cuban refugee camps in Panama. Cubans that were trying to get to the United States. And when they would get picked up, they'd be sent to these refugee camps in Panama where they would await processing to see if they could get into the States. While we were in jungle school, a bunch of these Cuban refugee camps rioted. And initially they took some U.S. guards hostage and eventually released them. But in order to regain control of the camps, the company of Rangers that I was with, we got pulled from Ranger School, issued riot shields and axe handles, and early in the morning we blew a hole in the fence and marched in a phalanx to kind of to restore order to the refugee camps. And that was just an absolutely surreal experience. But that was probably the last really cool thing I ever did in the Army.
Since both of you have been through that experience to get into recon, what is that tryout experience when you sign up?
You know, when you talk about BUDS, when you talk about the SEALs, you talk about BRC, which is the Basic Reconnaissance Course, and the reconnaissance mission, SEALs and reconnaissance Marines, their missions overlap, but the schoolhouses have two fundamentally different goals. In Buds, you're taking a lot of guys that they're in the Navy, not necessarily the hardest boot camp experience you could have. Whereas by the time a person gets to BRC, they've likely already done, they've already been to Marine Corps boot camp. They've already been to School of Infantry. Most likely they've already done a deployment with an infantry unit, but they've already been put through the grinder for a good 8 months. So BRC isn't really designed to necessarily weed anyone out, whereas Buds is used as a smoke check to kind of thin the herd. So the BRC experience was one of the most intense learning experiences of my life. So it's about 10 weeks long, set up into 3 phases, or at least it was when I was in there. But yeah, the schoolhouses, BRC is basically across the street from Buds. We see those guys in their nice light boats, and sometimes they'll I almost use the H word. They don't haze. Sometimes they'll smoke us in the surf with the seal cannon, the seal pups or whatever they're called. In BRC, we had a SEAL instructor. It's my understanding that there's a recon instructor at Buds. I'm not sure.
What was that? What were those 3 phases, if you don't mind breaking them down for us?
Sure. All right. Off my memory. Well, when you get there, first start off with your assessment. So our first phase was basically schoolhouse, and I don't remember the official term for it. And I know that they've switched up the phases. For instance, first phase would be recon skills. Second was amphib, and then third was patrolling. It's my understanding now you do amphib second, patrolling last. I think we did it the opposite. No, hang on a second.
He's old.
I really am, and I get hit in the head for a hobby. So, thank God this isn't live.
So Dustin, real quick, why do you think it is that guys, there's like kind of this, it's not necessarily a pre-qualification to go to Buds. You know, you can go straight from boot camp into Buds, and you don't have to serve time on a ship or something in the Navy first.
I feel like it's probably a recruiting tool, because everyone wants to join the Navy and be a SEAL. And so if you can get a contract like that, that's just more reason for somebody to sign up. Because I know for a while there, back when I was trying to get into all that, back in like 2003, there was like a 1.5 to 2 year waiting list to go to Buds. So I feel like that probably dropped their recruiting numbers, and so the Navy offered a Buds contract, knowing that 90% of the people that got the Buds contract weren't going to make it, you know.
Yeah, and we've had some conversations with SEALs before, and I think Josh has probably told you all this, but just with all the media and stuff that's come out about them, their numbers have increased for Buds, right, and people applying for it, but the actual attrition rate has stayed the same. So kind of the makeup of the people, they're able to stay, remain. But so do you think that has anything to do with it? These people just coming in from outside, just trying to go straight to SEALs, or in the Marines case?
Well, I think the publicity of Buds and everything else allows people to prepare for it a lot easier too. They know what kind of is expected of them at Buds, and whereas before all of the media hype, maybe they just were kind of like, I want to be a SEAL. I heard it's cool, and then next thing you know, they're
trashed in the
they're
waves.
getting, yeah.
So why don't you think you hear as much about recon guys?
Yeah, and on that, because I know you mentioned us the last week when we spoke that the numbers are relatively the same, or even smaller for recon versus SEALs. We didn't know that.
Well, the Marine Corps in general is just smaller. I mean, we're the smallest branch in the military, so if you're going percentage-wise, like percentage X amount of Marines or Recon Marines, even if it's 10% of SEALs or 10% of the Navy are consistent of SEALs, and 10% of the Marine Corps consisted of recon. Obviously, that's not anywhere close to it, but proportionally, it'll be the same with the smaller numbers. Does that make sense?
I think one of the things that contribute to that kind of that low key, that difference, what you're saying, and exposure between the SEALs and Marine Recon. And I think that has a lot to do with the culture of the community. In the reconnaissance community, our focus is not the mission so much as it is the man. One of the lines in our creed is, "Forever shall I strive to uphold the tremendous reputation of those who've gone before me." And quiet professionalism is something that's just really instilled in each individual. So, we don't try to write a lot of books about ourselves, and we're not there. We don't go to recon to be in a limelight. We go to reconnaissance because we don't want to be in the limelight. We prefer let anyone else that wants credit for any of that, let them have it. It's supposed to be just for our community, and I'm sure there's going to be SEALs that are going to hate me now. I mean, that's not a first, but that's just the primary difference I see in the community. It almost seems like the SEALs have, and I'm a complete outsider, when it comes to SEALs. I only know 2 of them personally. So, but it's always seemed to me like, from the outside looking in, like a lot of the focus is on the mission, which it has to be. But I mean, this is why I don't do radio shows on my own, is because I need a script. But
maybe just explain for people what exactly recon is and what it does.
Okay, I think I can try that. I almost want to Wikipedia it, but primarily the function of...
We'll put that in the show notes, Wikipedia, Marine Recon.
Yes. The primary function of Marine reconnaissance is deep reconnaissance and what's called battlefield shaping. In other words, small reconnaissance teams out behind the lines, gathering all the battlefield intelligence for the battle commander, division, battalion, depending on what kind of a mission it is, gathering all that information and sending it back. Troop movements, details of troop configuration, everything from structures and obstacles, slopes being the slope of a hill, because the degree of a slope has a tremendous impact on, tactical advantage. So our primary mission has always been deep reconnaissance. Our secondary mission is direct action.
How large or how small are the teams that go out?
That's a fantastic question.
Depends on the mission.
It depends completely on the mission. I mean, I was trained to operate in 4 and 5 man teams. But I was what's called Greenside, which is I was in 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. We were training for that traditional reconnaissance role of a few guys going into the bush and getting eyes on an objective. If you look at force reconnaissance, one of their primary missions are what's called direct action. So they can operate in an entire platoon size. So they may or may not operate as a 4-man team, but they'll do larger scale raids on select objectives.
So, Dustin, on your most recent experience with your deployments, what was kind of a day in the life comparison from Marine infantry, going out knocking down doors every day, to Marine recon?
I never deployed as recon. I was always infantry, so it was always patrolling, raids, anything from when we were in Fallujah back in 2004 and 2005. After the main battle of Fallujah was done, it was doing a census of all the citizens that came back, writing down their names, writing down where they lived, to clearing out buildings.
So was your team one of those first boots on the ground into Fallujah to take over that city?
People don't realize Fallujah was actually battled twice. There was the initial push, but then they just rolled through, did it, and they left, and didn't have anybody stay behind, and then everyone just flooded back in. And then when they cleared it out again, that's when my battalion was involved with. So,
how many men would you say were in the Marines on going through Fallujah?
Oh, there's 3 battalions, so 3,000.
And that's a whole that is a whole level of skill to operate in a unit like Dustin's that is shoulder to shoulder with 3,000 people, all having to move as kind of one living organism in order to complete the mission. That's beyond my even level of being able to fathom the tactical.
There's also tanks involved. There was tracks. There was, helicopters, and there's a lot of coordination when it comes to a massive operation like that. And then after that, we went to in 2007. I was in Karma and Zidon, and it was a lot less of a volatile environment, but it was a lot of IEDs and a lot of snipers. A lot of snipers. It was like sniper infested over there. So the tactics had to change. It wasn't everybody just rushing in, and a lot of it was running from defilade to defilade, and then throwing smoke grenades. You walk around and look like a Christmas tree full of smoke grenades, so that you can move without getting shot.
So I've heard some military guys say they actually prefer being deployed over being stateside because you're actually getting to do what you've been trained for. Do y'all agree with that? And Dustin, do you feel like you might have, did you want to deploy as a recon?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's why I went over there. But by the time I got into it, the wars were dying down and everything else as well, and people weren't deploying as much. But I mean, before I went to 4th, I was, went to Iraq twice and Afghanistan once. So I kind of got my fair share.
Saw your fair share, yeah.
What were the main? Did you see any different tactics either used by your battalion or the enemy between Iraq and Afghanistan?
Oh, definitely. Iraq was not as kinetic as Afghanistan was. Afghanistan was, when we were there in 2008, we were the first Marine Infantry Battalion in that province since 2002. So there was nobody. They basically chased everyone from up north down south, and then they just left it unchecked. And so it was literally a hornet's nest, like Wild Wild West. There was nobody there but us. And so we were spread out so thin. One battalion was spread out over the entire province. And so we were in platoon size patrol bases and everything else. And medevacs were 6 hours away. If you get shot, you just better live because there's nobody coming. A lot of times, you go black on ammo, water, food, and everything else. And so you just better live, But
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays,
what do we have to complain about?
Nowadays, from the people that deployed after us, because when we went to Afghanistan, the focus was still on Iraq. Nobody ever talked about Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan's all you hear about. Well, now that ISIS is here, you hear about Iraq again. But so nobody gave us any attention. They just thought we were just going to be there to just be there. I guess I don't know. Some of the generals and stuff like that I forgot his name, but he gave a speech and he was saying how he regretted putting us into that situation with the resources that we had. And basically, our deployment paved the way for all the tactics and everything else of Afghanistan for all the battalions going in afterwards. Now there's air bases, there's Pizza Huts and stuff. I mean, they didn't have any of that when I was there. The funny thing is we went to this area called Delaram, which Delaram was a fob by this bridge, and it was just there to hold this bridge, and it was maybe the size of this building right here. And now it's a huge air base, and there's all these food places donut shops and stuff like that on this base, and people talk about how nice it is. And I was like, well, I remember digging a hole to go to sleep there. So
what was the morale of the guys like at that point? How do you keep those spirits up when you're running out of food and ammo?
I mean, it's really just like it's kind of like a bonding experience. I'll never, ever, ever in my entire life have friends like I had there. And I mean, we fought just like your brothers. You fight with your brother whenever shit gets stressful, but at the same time, you still love your brother.
So, what was a moment during any deployment that you can recall where the time kind of stood still, you slowed down, and paused, and it was like this thought of, I better do something right now or else?
Well, see, a lot of times you go into like this autopilot mode. Like, you don't really realize what's going on. Your instincts kick in and your body just takes over. You're not really thinking about it. Afterwards, you're like, whoa, but while it's happening, I don't know, it's like a surreal feeling.
I think for me, that happened in a bar in Thailand, and I saw this girl, and I better do something right now. Oh, I'm kidding. It's like what Dustin said. Hey, it was only 150 baht. That's like $15 US.
Yeah, you might get a little something extra though.
Wasn't so little. Yeah, what Dustin said, that's kind of the reason why we train so hard, is so that we don't have moments like that. Because if you're having a moment where you're kind of sitting there, even for a split second, thinking, I better do something,
you already messed up.
Yeah, something else has already, that's changed. Whatever you're focusing on, trying to decide what to do, that has probably already changed, and the whole situation's changed. So it's kind of, that's you train the way you fight the way you train. That's why, Dustin was saying that his experience in Iraq was completely different than Afghanistan. And they dropped his guys off basically on a hilltop and said, okay, well, you guys figure out how we're fighting this thing. And that's what they did, because that's just what they do. They improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Also, a lot of people ask about being scared in like combat situations, and I've never, I'm not saying I'm like some badass, but I've never been scared in any kind of combat situation because I'm thinking too much, if that makes sense. Like, I'm assessing things, especially being in a leadership role. You're seeing where the fire's coming from, where you can go, if you get shot, or if someone gets shot, where can you medevac them from, what's your next move, stuff like that. So it's, like I said, it's one of those kind of, you're thinking, but you're not thinking. I don't know. You're not really self-assessing the danger that you're in. But afterwards, that's when you get all shaky when it's all said and done.
And when we talk about fear, that's something that has a kind of a different concept to everyone. It's to say, if I said, bullets were flying and I wasn't afraid, that means something different than let me see what I'm trying to say. My biggest fear, and I can almost guarantee you Dustin's going to agree with me, my biggest fear is letting my guys down. That's the only thing I'm afraid of. And that's kind of what kind of propels you. That whole fear of death, the whole combative situation, that kind of compresses itself in the center of your being. And you kind of wrap that into a little ball and you stuff it deep down inside of you. And it just is, And besides, if, for me, I just kind of made up my mind that I was already dead. So if I'm already dead, I don't have to worry about it. And, that's why, some people will say, hey, if you've never had to write death letters and keep them stashed in a box for your team so that if somebody doesn't come home, in case you don't come home, I mean, you sit there and write that last letter to your wife or, you know, your boyfriend. And, you know, that's an experience of death, because you have to kind of confront your own mortality before you ever even step foot on any kind of operation.
So say you have an Army private, he's going on his first deployment and he's scared to death, right? How do you teach him to do that? Or can you? Do you think it's just in your makeup?
We're dealing with an Army private, first off, so...
Bad example.
I feel like it's just in your makeup, but I feel like joining the Marines, it's kind of like, and I'm not talking down any other service, but people join the Marines knowing that, especially if you join the Marine Infantry or Recon or anything like that, you know what you're getting yourself into. You know you're about to go fight, especially if you join during wartime. So I feel like it attracts certain people who are almost wanting to be in those kind of situations. I know I did. You know, I didn't want to push papers somewhere or anything like that.
Do you think some people's lack of fear could come from lack of training or lack of preparedness, maybe?
Lack of fear come from lack of training?
No, a fear could come from lack of preparedness or training.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole premise behind all the training. It's one of the reasons why, you know, schools like Basic Reconnaissance Course are so incredibly hard, because they basically try to make the school so hard and such an ass kicker that by the time you actually get into combat, you're like, this ain't patrol phase. I'm doing just fine. You know, it won't be the first time you've been up for 4 straight days with no food.
And I feel like that goes for anything. Like if you just hammer into someone what you need to do in certain situations and everything else so hard that eventually when it comes down to it and they're tired and they don't have the right state of mind to think, they're just going to, like I said, go into that autopilot mode, and just their instincts are going to take over after that point.
Yeah, I don't think civilians like us even realize how much training, you know, the military actually goes through. I remember talking with a Vietnam vet before, and he's in his 60s now, and he said he could still field strip his M16 if I hung him upside down blindfolded and he had mittens on, because he'd just done it, you know, 3,000, 6,000 times, whatever it is. So, I mean, do y'all have any skills like that you could still do blindfolded upside down?
I mean, I still know my tactics in case, you know, the zombie apocalypse ever happens, but...
We're going to test both of you on that after the show, too, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's just that whole... It literally changes your DNA. And I'm not trying to use that like, you know, some basic chick. I mean, literally, it fundamentally changes who you are at a cellular level. And I'm just talking about the training itself, you know, and that's just one of the main things, that whole stress and fear inoculation, you know, once you've confronted fear so many times or confronted stress so many times, then your body and your mind build up a natural ability to combat those things.
So how do you go about decompressing when you're overseas or on a mission for months and you come back from 2 days, 3 days, 5 hours, whatever it is? Is there any sort of way that you go about decompressing?
Well, we never went to like a safe haven per se. So we would get off of a patrol or whatever, and you'd be at a fob, like I said, that's tiny, that's getting rocketed on the regular, getting mortared and getting shot at.
Describe what the fob is.
Fob is just literally 4 walls of dirt where you're sleeping that night.
Forward operating base.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's an acronym for forward operating base. Apologize. I always assume people know my acronyms. So yeah, I mean, you're never really safe, so it's kind of hard to decompress. But I mean, I don't know. It's not like you're just constantly on guard like in the movies. which is kind of a bad thing to say because, sometimes you do get complacent, especially if something doesn't happen for a few days. And the next thing you know, like that bullet whipping by you again, and like, okay, it's time to go back on. But even like back home after being on deployment, I know it's not like freak out like or have any kind of major episode or anything like that. But I would. It was weird. Like I'd be just sitting there, and I would think, well, if somebody walks through this door right now shooting, what am I going to do? And I'd plan out things like that. Like it never like enacted, but I'd sit there and think like, okay, well, if this guy's going to pull out a gun right now, what am I going to do? And here's the exits, and here's what I could use for a weapon. I look at things like if you've got a watch in your left wrist, that means you're probably right-handed. So if you swing at me, I know where it's going to come from, majority-wise, Or see if someone's got a pocket knife in their pocket. Just random things like that. And sometimes I still do that. I still assess situations, whereas I feel like normal humans don't do
that. For me, hypervigilance is just kind of my way of life. I don't stand in doorways. I'm always looking for the exits, seeing who's coming and who's going. The hands will kill you, so I'm always trying to be aware of what's in people's hands, what they're holding, what they're doing with them. But as far as decompressing, self-love. That's the easiest way to decompress. I don't think I can say masturbation on the show. Can I say masturbation on the show?
You just did twice.
I said masturbation twice?
Mine was listening to music, and so that's in comic books. I'm a nerd.
Mine was reading books and MMA. We had a good crew of guys to train with when I was deployed, so and that's kind of been my go-to for stress, is being involved in mixed martial arts, most of my adult life.
It sounds like you guys, and most of the special forces guys out there, are kind of just masters of being able to compartmentalize things. Even like during training and everything, if you got to run 8 miles later, but you're doing log PT right now, all you're doing is worried about log PT. You're not worried about what you have to do later, right? Or if bullets are going by you right now, you're not worried about whatever's going on back at the fob or whatever else. You're just, I'm in this right now. I got to get through this now, and then we'll worry about what comes next.
Well, I mean, if you're in a firefight and you're thinking about what's going back on the fob,
Yeah.
I don't think it has anything to do with special forces. I think you're just fucked at that point. Excuse my French.
Was that French?
That was French.
No.
Lay fucked.
I'm trying to figure out how to answer that.
Would you compartmentalize not only in action, but your personal life, your military life?
You'd have to talk to my ex-girlfriend about that one. Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of the, I don't know, that's just kind of what happens. You become a compartmentalized individual, unless you're me and all your compartments have cracks in the seams. And
what are 2 things that, from all of your military experience, you would recommend for discipline or building habits?
Structure. That's kind of how we run the bar here. I mean, Aaron's my kitchen manager. He's a Marine. I own the bar. I'm a Marine. My bar manager is Sean. He's a Marine. We've got another Marine named Dan that works for us. He's another cook. I got about to hire another Marine named Michael. He's going to be a bartender. So that makes 5 Marines that work here. So we all know the chain of command. Like, I fully trust Aaron to take care of his stuff. All he does is tell me what he's doing, and I'm just yay or nay, And I don't have to worry about him or the kitchen. And with the bar, when Sean, I don't have to worry about the bar. I can just worry about, paperwork basically now. Whereas I know a lot of other bar owners and general managers are like losing their mind because they have to do every little detail of everything because, they just can't trust who they have working for them. So that's one thing I brought from civilian life, and that's why I hire almost exclusively vets. I mean, so I've got 5 Marines, 2 Army, and 1 Navy that work for me. So
advice? Me? not good at advice. For someone who was going in, was that your question?
Your own takeaways.
I've learned a lot of hard lessons especially over the last few years. But I guess if there's two things, have integrity. Whether you want it or not, have it. You know, be true to yourself, be true to truth. And then I guess behind that, be the kind of person that you want in your life. And that's not very military specific, but if, you know, you think about the kind of people that you want in your life, you know, you want good, honorable, dedicated people as your friends, you've got to be that too. And so those are my two tidbits.
That's some great advice. And I don't think people know that we have a celebrity in our midst too. Apparently, there was a character that plays you on Generation Kill. Is that correct, Aaron?
Oh God, no! I am not in any way, shape, or form on Generation Kill.
Not you yourself.
No, I didn't. My company, Bravo Company, second and third platoons. Those were the guys on Generation Kill. I was with first platoon. I was with the 15th MEU on the Tarawa. So thank God, I was nowhere near any Rolling Stone reporters or anything, because I would have made a total ass of myself. Even worse than I'm doing right now. It would have been just ugly.
One of his best friends is Fruity Rudy.
One of my besties.
Could you just give a quick background for everybody what Generation Kill is and the Rolling Stone report?
Oh, yeah, sure. I guess I can talk about that. So when we were getting ready to invade Iraq, Evan Wright, the military was doing this big thing with all these embedded reporters. They wanted all these media representatives to go out with the units that were going to deploy. Well, Evan Wright, reporter from Rolling Stone, got 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. And legend has it, I haven't read the book or seen the miniseries in a while, but legend has it that he was going to stay in the Tactical Operations Center with Lieutenant Colonel Ferrando and all those guys. And he wanted to be out with the teams. So he traded his sat phone to the battalion commander to put him on a team. So, you know, he got to live with 2 platoons of Reconnaissance Marines for most of the invasion. When he was done being embedded with 1st Recon, he wrote a series of articles for Rolling Stone. And I remember the articles when they came out. They created a huge uproar in the reconnaissance community, because, you know, he really highlighted some of the conflicts that the enlisted and the officers were having, because we were a peacetime Marine Corps finally going to war. So after writing this series of articles, he wrote a book called Generation Kill. And then HBO picked it up and made it a miniseries. And it's actually a really good miniseries. And one of the guys in Bravo Company, Rudy Reyes, there's only one. There can only be one. And you can't find an actor that looks anything like Rudy Reyes. So he played himself. And he's been consistently working in film. He just got cast for a new movie called John Comes Home, and he's going to be out working on filming with that. So
he and Rudy Reyes have been in battle in other ways. Do you want to explain that one?
Oh, I don't know. Is the statute of limitations? What's the statute of limitations for Rudy and I? Let's see. I gotta think tactically here. Rudy and I used to train together back in Bravo Company. We were the 2 martial arts guys. He was really into Kung Fu, a lot of Eastern philosophy, and really just an incredibly disciplined, centered human. And I was into Brazilian jiu-jitsu and boxing, and I'm really not that centered of a human. So we would get together and train. Well, probably about 2008, 9, I started to have a lot of issues with my brain issues. That long story takes us to Irving, Texas, in December, attending a brain therapy treatment center. And it just so happens that Rudy and I both end up there at the same time together. And we're staying at this beautiful 4-star hotel, and just a really nice place. And so every night after therapy, Rudy and I are down in the bar, having a few drinks, eating dinner, laughing, reminiscing. We get to know all the bartenders. Everybody knows us. Not on purpose. It's just how we go. Good luck finding that one and editing it out.
This is how we do it.
So I don't know how exactly to tell the story without sound like I'm trying to make myself sound cool, because I'm definitely not. Long story short, there was a group of corporate individuals that were having a party at the hotel bar, and I guess they didn't like us. Anyway, Rudy and I step outside, and there were two. Trying to think of how to do this. Last thing I want are like criminal charges. All right, so basically, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to do a Richard Marcinko on this. If you don't know who Richard Marcinko is, he was like the first famous SEAL. So none of this actually, what I'm about to tell you, never happened. It just never happened. This is a story that I'm working on. It's all fiction. So Rudy and I are at the bar, and a couple of his buddies from Austin come up, and we're hanging out. One of them was a captain in the Army and had just gotten out like 48 hours before. We're having a great time. This private party comes in. They're all in tuxes, and it's some kind of corporate thing. And Rudy and I, we don't necessarily like look like everyone else. He's got a very flamboyant isn't the word, because it's not flamboyant. My words are failing. Eccentric, yeah. And I generally like to wear bow ties and bowlers. So we both look rather unique, and, we laugh loud. We have a good time. But the atmosphere in the bar kind of just starts getting real douchey, basically. So Rudy and I go outside. We're going to hang out for a minute, let things cool. And remember, at this point, nothing has been said between our little group and this big group. We go out front, and we're out there maybe 3 minutes, and all of a sudden, the bartender opens up the front door and goes, "Rudy, your boys are getting their asses kicked." So Rudy just bolts right on in there, and I'm coming in behind him. And what had happened is this corporate party had started trouble, and the bartenders, remember, fiction. The bartenders had seen it happen, had seen these guys come over and start trouble. And as it happens, they hit one of our friends with a wine bottle in the side of the head, and actually broke part of his orbital socket. Nothing was happening when we got in there. It was all over with. Well, Rudy doesn't know who's good. So Rudy goes running in, and in the main lobby of this 5-star hotel,
it was 4-star just a minute ago.
Was it?
It was.
Five?
The story's getting better.
4.5. Yeah.
It has a bar.
Thanks. It has a bar. All these people are coming out of the bar. Rudy doesn't know what's going on. And he's going, "Is everybody okay? Is everybody okay?" Well, the party that kind of we'd been feeling the vibe from all these guys start grabbing Rudy. Like, hey, you know, trying to like get in his face. And Rudy is just, he's the coolest guy. He's just like, brothers, I don't want to fight anybody. I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to do anything like that. And, you know, these guys are getting in Rudy's face and people are starting to put hands on him. And Rudy is, you know, finally, Rudy's actually kind of surrounded by a group. And I'm hanging out at the side because I'm not as subtle as Rudy is. And so when a couple guys start to grab him, Rudy goes, guys, I don't want to fight. And all I can see are these guys grabbing Rudy. And every once in a while over the group, I'll see a pair of wingtips go flying. Because he's just doing little kung fu moves. And just guys throwing, guys will grab him. He's tossing them off like they're nothing. And he's, guys, I don't want to hurt you. And that's when things kind of like, hey, you know, stop this. And at that point, Rudy kind of like, I think he flipped the guy and then tripped over him. And he went to the ground. So he had a bunch of guys on top of him. And even from under the pile, I can hear Rudy saying, brothers, I don't want to hurt you. And they're kind of laughing. And I watch one guy come around on the outside of the group. And I watch him look at Rudy's head. Rudy's laying on the ground trying to wrestle these guys off him. And he raises his foot to do a foot stomp. And so I hit him with a right and he went to sleep. And then just all hell broke loose. And there's Rudy and I back to back, just kind of in a slugfest. And I
imagine like an 80s action film right
now.
It
is. And I swear it's kind of like
Kenny Loggins playing in the background.
we were definitely in a zone of danger. But yeah, it was kind of like you know, Jack Burton in Big Trouble in Little China. It was so surreal that I remember Rudy and I being back to back and talking to each other while it's going on, because we never deployed together. And I'm like, Rudy, I've always wanted to share the field of battle with you. And he's like, me too, brother. Me too. And so this thing is going on. And it's all happening really fast. I look over, and of course, if you've never seen Rudy Reyes, we used to call him Flawless. For Flawless Rudy Reyes. And I'll tell you the joke right now. The joke is that, and it's really more of a truth, 99% of men admit to having gay thoughts about Rudy Reyes. It doesn't make you homosexual. It just makes you human. Because the man is beautiful. So we're in the middle of this scrap fest. And of course, the whole time Rudy's telling me, guys, we're not here to fight. We're here for therapy. And I look over and Rudy's got his shirt off. You know, just with his
I was just picturing this
abs.
with his shirt off anyway. I don't know why.
Well, that's just his natural state. And so in the fray, I look over and I'm like, he took his shirt off in the fight. I'm like, so not one to be outdone, I ripped my shirt off, realizing instantly that was the biggest mistake. Is that I'm an in shape guy. But when I look over at Rudy Reyes, and I look back at myself, I realized...
You just put a shirt back on?
I had no time. But I just looked at him and looked at myself and was like, I gotta get back in the gym. And then at that moment, who do you think everybody's gonna attack? Do you really think they're gonna attack, you know, this Rudy Reyes, you know, Mexican Adonis over here? Or the short, fat, hairy Irishman over here? You're right. It was going to be me. So
Mexican and Irish teaming up.
Yes.
Team Green Bean.
Yes. It was like the San Patricios Battalion in the Mexican American War, I think. So anyway, at the end of the day, I don't think anybody else got hurt. All I remember is that we were back to back behind the Christmas tree because there were just so many of them. And so we're back to back. They have to come around the Christmas tree, and we're just standing there kind of trying to fend off the horde of penguins. And it was like we were in a high school kegger. We're in a 4-star hotel, and someone goes, cops. and all these penguins start running like someone's just killed their party. So they all run, and we're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And that's when the bar door opens, and it's the bar manager there. He's like, Rudy, Aaron, come on. We go into the bar, and they lock the deadbolt, send us up the service elevator, and tell us not to come back down until it's all over with.
That was a very good fictional story.
Yes, it was 100% fiction.
What we did mention in the story is we killed 5 guys.
While Aaron's out fighting in bars after his military service, what were you doing, Dustin?
I was working at Walmart doing loss prevention. Yeah, I got fired from Walmart. Twice, actually. I got fired, rehired, and then fired again. First time I got fired, this guy pulled out a box cutter on me, so I took him down, and I elbowed him till his teeth came out. And then he ended up on YouTube somehow.
What? I haven't seen that.
Type in college station Walmart thief. Bam.
Are we even bros, dude? I've never even seen that.
Brother, show me your And so yeah, they fired me, and a couple months later they called me back like, hey, if you want your job back, we'll give it to you. And I was like, okay.
So they fired you for doing your job, though.
Yeah. Well, they fired me because the policy is if they have a weapon, you're supposed to immediately disengage. But by then he was already like slashing at me. So, and then a few months later, a guy pulled a gun on me, so I killed him. And then I didn't really bother reapplying after that. So,
can you elaborate on that story for the listeners?
Stopped a shoplifter. I didn't realize this guy was like fresh out the pen. He did like a 10 or 12 year stint.
So, but your detail inside Walmart, you kind of dress as a civilian, right?
Yeah, no, that's actually, you're supposed to dress quote unquote undercover, like in civilian clothes. And so I caught this guy stealing. You can't stop until he gets out the door. So he gets out the door, and he's got a ton of merchandise. So I grabbed the front of the basket, and I was like, hey man, I need you to come talk to me about the stuff you took. And he takes off running, so I tackle him. When I tackle him, I'm on top of him. And he goes, I thought he was punching me, so I blocked it. When I blocked it, I heard the shot. And I realized that he wasn't trying to punch me. He was trying to put the gun to my head. And so the gun goes off behind my head. I grab the gun, bring it up front. The gun goes off again, but the second time the gun goes off, my hand is over the ejection port, so the gun jams. So I rip the gun out of his hand, step back, clear the jam real fast, and I point at him. Then I guess he thought I was bluffing or something because he pulls out a knife. I was like, dude, I'm gonna kill you if you come at me with that knife. And he came at me with the knife, so I killed him.
Man. So what merchandise was he trying to get out of there that was worth his life?
Well, I wasn't gonna kill him for stealing.
Well, no, I know that's not on you, but I mean he did that to himself. Is what I'm saying.
He was stealing a bunch of stuff. I mean, they did what's called bagging, where he goes and grabs all a bunch of stuff and then takes shopping bags and then puts them all in the bags, and so that way when he walks out, it looks like he bought it all.
That's pretty intense.
I'm so uncomfortable with both of these stories.
Mine was made public. Yours is about to be public. So,
how public was that story when it happened?
Well, nothing ever happens in this town, so it was like all over the place.
And Aaron, you actually did some contract work outside the military.
Oh, that's something I can actually talk about. Oh, that's great.
I think a lot of people maybe are misunderstood or don't really understand what contract military looks like.
Well, I mean,
Do you approach them? Do they approach you? What's kind of the duties and the objectives versus conventional military?
Well, to begin with, the number one difference is that private military contractors are not allowed to take part in any type of offensive operation. They have to be defensive in nature. As far as anything else beyond that, it is 100% situationally dependent on the company you're working for, the contract the company has, the area of operations, the theater that you're in. I mean, there's no cookie cutter for it. You know, my experience contracting is going to be completely different than someone else. I've got friends that do other governmental agency contracting where, you know, they're being subcontracted to, you know, guard embassy personnel, close protection details, stuff like that. And, you know, that kind of goes with the other question, like, do you call them? Do they call you? if it's what I would say, a real high level gig, it's going to be, you're going to get a phone call. Hey, from your buddy who's also on that contract going, hey, I need some more guys. You want to come work with me? At my level, I applied to different companies. I got lucky and got hired on some contracts, and that was a good time. I started initially working for the infamous Blackwater after Hurricane Katrina. My next gig, I got picked up by a company called Triple Canopy. Got sent to the most amazing school as far as it was called a high risk PSD course, and that was a 3-week course full time on how to do executive protection and dignitary protection in a high threat environment. And it was shooting and learning how to do what's called walk the diamond, and learning how to do site assessments and advanced work and driving. And that was really amazing. My last, probably the only company I really identify with, I got hired by a company called Cochise Consultancy. And what they were working on is a Department of Defense unexploded munitions project in southern Iraq. And so I was a part of a team of security guys that protected a team of civilian explosives guys. And we basically built a fort out in southern Iraq and spent the time guarding them while they picked up all of the unexploded bombs left over from Saddam's arsenal and then destroyed them. So I wasn't involved in anything all that glamorous. It was good work, and sometimes it was dangerous. Sometimes it was really, really boring. But the whole purpose of having private military contractors is to free up American troops so that we can do the things that we don't have to have American troops on the ground.
What would you recommend to civilians that they could do to protect themselves?
I would recommend Krav Maga, and I can attest to it firsthand because that's what I used with that whole Walmart thing.
Could you explain what that is?
So there's two different types of Krav Maga, actually. There's Krav Maga and there's Commando Krav Maga. Commando Krav Maga is what they teach the Israeli forces. It's almost exclusively how to deal with somebody with a weapon when you don't. You get a lot of people and a lot of like martial arts programs and stuff like that that seems cool and stuff like that, but when you actually try to apply it practically, it's just not feasible. Well, I can once again attest to Commando Krav Maga being just awesome.
And is that the one spelled? Is it KRAV?
KRAVMAGA, 2 words.
And how long do you think it would take to do some training or classes like that to feel at least somewhat equipped?
Well, there's no belt system. There's level systems, but they it's nice because they teach you the essentials right off the bat. It's not like here's how you punch and then you do that for 2 months and then they teach you about a knife or a gun. They teach you the guns and knives first, and then they start teaching you the other stuff. And it's 100% dirty fighting. It's kicking in the nuts. It's gouging out eyes. It's biting jugulars. I mean, it is the hands down the most dirty fighting ever. But it's practical. If you're in a life or death situation, that's definitely what I would use. I mean, or what I have used. And just carry a weapon.
When people ask me, well, what can I do to be more safe? Well, first, safety isn't a place, and safety isn't a weapon. Safety is a mindset. It's a lifestyle choice. You have to have the first way to really increase your personal safety is to have a lifestyle of vigilance, being aware of your surroundings and your place in them. It's amazing to me how many people will go out and get a concealed handgun license and never go to the range or ever shoot. So they have the gun, but that's a response. A gun doesn't make you either more safe or less safe. It is simply a response to a perceived or real threat. What really makes us safe is, like I said, having that mindset of vigilance, a vigilant lifestyle. The second thing that people can do to protect themselves when it comes down to that is, and here's where I'm going to go off on one of my little tangents. I love the police. Not really, but and something you guys probably don't know about me is I was a police officer in Albuquerque, New Mexico when I got out of the Marine Corps before I went and started contracting. But the fact of the matter is the police, especially according to the Supreme Court, are not obligated to protect us. They don't have a duty to protect anyone, and it's not their responsibility. It is the responsibility of every grown adult to protect themselves and the other people around them. So having a mindset of vigilance, getting a concealed carry permit, being trained in the use of your firearm, practicing consistently, and then beyond that, learning a martial art that I would say that you enjoy. My personal belief is that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling are probably are my personal two favorites. But that's my Krav Maga is great, works. I've seen a lot of I've seen Rudy Reyes flip people all over a ballroom with kung fu. So find something you like. But the biggest thing I just can't repeat it enough. The biggest thing is by practicing a lifestyle of vigilance and being aware and alert.
What are some books or documentaries that you would recommend that either, well, obviously that you've read or watched, but that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be military, maybe something that you feel accurately depicts military life or Marine life, and also just something general life books?
I mean, Restrepo's a good one. As far as life, I mean, there's not a whole lot of actual documentaries that depict that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'll throw that one out there, just out of like being limited to those types of documentaries. I'm a big conspiracy theorist, so any kind of conspiracy theory documentary, zeitgeist.
Well, the first book I could think of would be The Gift of Fear by author Gavin de Becker. And that was the first book I ever read about vigilance and about awareness and learning how to listen to your own intuition. So that relates earlier to what we were talking about, but that book is, and then he's got a follow-up to that book called Protecting the Gift, and it's basically for parents, and it talks about how to not just be more aware in regards to the safety of a person's children, but how to impart that awareness to the child without ruining their childhood with big bad wolf stories. As far as documentaries, Heartbreak Ridge.
Most recent book you read?
I just finished The Path of Danger by David Drake. And then now I'm currently working my way through Super Gods. Now blanking on the author's name, but Super Gods was written. I have to look it up. It's a great book. It's about the parallels of our current comic superheroes, kind of the origin of comics, how they evolved, and how they represent our cultures in a lot of the same ways as, like, say, their ancient gods, the ancient Greek.
What's kind of next for you guys?
Already looking at another location. I know that's the case. I'm going to bring this guy with me.
I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Someday I'll grow up, and then I'll maybe find a career and do that. I would love to be a musician. I play bass. I love the blues. But for right now, what I'm doing is I'm running this kitchen for my brother, and we're going to open up some more places and make it a big success. And then as soon as it's a nice big success, then I'll go to the next challenge, like Cain walking the desert, putting wrongs to right.
Hey, best blues band no one knows about right now we can shine some light on.
Best blues band that no one knows about right now. Oh, I listen to so little modern blues. I mean, I listen to Muddy Waters, Albert Collins, Albert King, B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. My favorite blues artist is Muddy Waters. That's hands down. I listen to Muddy all day.
Do y'all have any morning routines that stuck with you from the military, or any physical routines that you would recommend for somebody?
Everybody's got their own routine. I was living out of my car. I was on my way to going crazy. Didn't have a job. Didn't have anything going for me. And, I literally had nothing. This guy who I'd really only met 2 or 3 times. I'd only met Dustin maybe 2 or 3 times. But, he's a brother. He's a Marine. And he saw that I was hurting. And so he said, "Hey, man, I'll come out to College Station. I'll set you up, get you a job." And so I did. I came out here, and the guy, he gave me his apartment. When I first got here, my head was a mess. I was getting my life together and needed direction. And it's been, I've been getting to the VA, getting my counseling. I've been working full time. I've been exercising, running. I go to BV MMA. I do jiu-jitsu. Bubba Bush, who's actually getting ready to fight in the UFC in Dublin. And he's a local MMA fighter that's about to get his second UFC fight. But the whole reason that I'm even able to halfway function through this radio show is because of guys like Dustin. That's he's my brother, and I'm really excited to see the bar be as successful as it's been. I think this is just I think we're just scratching the surface. I think this bar is going to continue to grow. I think his businesses are going to continue to grow. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, man.
Oh, that's awesome to hear.
I love you, brother.
I mean, what's something you pulled out of that experience?
Man, never lose the creed. I started making never compromise yourself. I started making compromises, character compromises a few years ago. A lot of people, there was a long time where I blamed a girl. I fell in love with a girl and she broke my heart and lied to me and all that. Sure. But at the end of the day, I compromised myself. I started taking shortcuts that I knew weren't right. Shortcuts like, not staying in the gym, not being true to myself, trying drugs. And I don't mean cannabis. I mean, trying drugs, and just really lost. And I can't say lost because I can't say I lost my integrity and my character. I didn't lose it. I put it on a shelf. I decided that I wasn't going to live my life according to my creed. I wasn't going to live my life according to everything I had previously based my life on. And it has been one of the hardest struggles of my existence to get it back. So that's the one thing that I've taken from the last year in the last 2 years is that never again will I ever sacrifice my own personal sense of integrity.
Is that something you wake up every day now and just kind of remind yourself, even when if it's still hard, if it's a hard day?
Absolutely. Every day, I literally wear a reminder every day. But, every morning I wake up, I think about it. Every night when I go to sleep. Dustin wasn't the only guy that helped me out. There's a nonprofit for reconnaissance Marines and special operations Marine called Raider Project. And the very first type of therapy I had was at a place called Carrick Brain Centers in Irving. And the bill was $60,000. No way I was going to get into that therapy program without the Raider Project. They foot the bill. That's the reason why I'm standing today, is because of my brothers.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the 2Fit Podcast. This episode is brought to you by 2Fit USA, the sports nutrition company owned and operated by the 2Fit guys. To show our appreciation for you tuning into the podcast, we would like to give you a 10% off your entire order at 2fitusa.com. All of our products are sugar-free, paleo-friendly, gluten-free, non-GMO, and a whole list of other buzzwords. So hop on over to 2fitusa.com. Don't forget to use your promo code FIT1, that's FIT1 at checkout. We highly value and appreciate your feedback, so please leave a review about the products and the podcast at our website, 2fitusa.com, under the podcast and products pages. You can also leave a review on iTunes. Now, if we happen to read your review during one of our podcasts, you'll receive a 1-month free subscription of all 2Fit products. So write something noteworthy. If not, we probably won't read it anyway. So go leave a review, listen to the next episode, and till next time.